Mental health stigma amongst Indigenous Australians. What is mental health? Mental health affects the psychological, emotional, and social well-being of individuals. It impacts on how people think, feel, and act. Issues that Indigenous people face. The Aboriginal and Indigenous population suffer from many issues within their communities that contribute to their mental health and social well-being. Indigenous Australians still carry the burden of the effects of the stolen generation and the traumatic experiences that their families and communities faced. As a result of the stolen generation, the loss of identity and culture is a major issue contributing to the mental health of Indigenous people. The life expectancy of Indigenous Australians is devastatingly low, resulting in many premature deaths in their lives. Grief, loss, and stress all have an influence on the mental health of an individual. The stresses of living in an overcrowded home is another issue impacting on the social well-being of Indigenous people. Without having any personal space, there is high risk of anxiety and stress in an individual. The effect of substance abuse is a major issue in the Indigenous community as it contributes to the mental health of not only the individual but also the other people living in the home, such as women, children, and men. What is stigma? Stigma is referred to as the bodily signs designed to expose something unusual and bad about the moral status of the signifier. Stigma associated with Aboriginal and Indigenous people. Stigma of mental illness towards the Aboriginal community can come from healthcare workers themselves. Healthcare workers who cannot speak the language often use shorthand forms of verbal and non-verbal communication. A rural and remote healthcare worker has said that the use of the term Rama Rama needs to stop being used by healthcare workers as it translates more correctly to crazy. This leaves the Indigenous people feeling stigmatised as crazy, which can also result in them not wanting to seek help from healthcare professionals in fear of being seen as crazy instead of ill. It is important that healthcare workers be trained in the appropriate ways to communicate with Aboriginals to ensure there is no disrespect to culture. Within the Aboriginal community, there is stigma towards the mental health of others. It is perceived that mental illness isn't something that people have, it is just who they are. Studies have shown that 3 out of 4 respondents believed that a person with a mental illness has no mental health problems, rather that it is just who they are and how they are. It was also reported that as a result of this, it is most likely that individuals will not seek or obtain the assistance needed for them to overcome their mental health issues, or take part in programs and interventions to help them overcome their mental health problem. Indigenous people suffer from many of the same stigma and discrimination towards mental illness as non-Indigenous people do. Some of these issues include the ideas that mental illness is rare, mental illness is a weakness, you do not need to be treated to overcome mental illness, and people with a mental illness are dangerous. As a consequence of these misconceptions about mental illness, individuals who need to seek treatment from professionals often do not, and are less likely to take part in programs and interventions as a result of being afraid of being seen as weak and portrayed in a negative way. In 2007, findings found that 2.1 million Australians had experienced symptoms of mental illness but received no treatment for their conditions, a statistic that needs to change. How to address stigma constructively. In order to reduce stigma, people need to be more educated about mental illness, what it is and why it happens. This will allow people to understand mental illness and what it means for people to be mentally ill and how things that people say is affecting others. Through people in the community and role models speaking out, it allows people to see that the people that are looked up to in the community face these problems as well. Open discussion about mental illness is very important. The less people talk about mental illness, the more it continues to be taboo and something bad. How will this impact on participation in programs? Addressing stigma through education will encourage and increase individuals to participate in programs without being afraid of being labelled negatively. Seeing people in the community having overcome mental illness will encourage positive attitudes towards programs and treatments, as they are examples of overcoming mental health problems. Mental illness is nothing to be ashamed of, but stigma and bias shames us all. Thank you.